So, I'm starting a job soon, which is going to be taking up a lot of my free time. Knowing the way that I tend to crash and burn out, it's going to take me a little bit to adjust around a different schedule. So until then, the video I had planned for this month isn't going to be coming out this month. However, I think this gives me the perfect opportunity to talk about something I always wanted to talk about. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm trans. It's something I think I've made quite apparent, but I haven't really explicitly stated or gone into detail about. Can't believe they made dead air films woke. So obviously, I was born a man, or assigned male at birth. My coming out story, now that I look back on it, had a lot of shall we say, hills and valleys. When I was really young, like preschool, early elementary school, I tended to get along with both genders pretty well. I never really went through that girls have cooties phase. I actually preferred playing like house and like with stuffed animals. I just also felt pressure to do sports because that's what boys do, I guess. In middle school, I was leaning a bit more towards like a feminine, fashion-obsessed style. Like I started really kind of curating and caring for my appearance. I don't really have a lot of pictures of this point in my life, but I was experimenting with scarves, different hats, turtlenecks, stuff I would get bullied for wearing at school. I also grew out my hair a bit more. I had like these stereotypical Asian kid bangs, which apparently nothing has changed. However, in early high school, something kind of switched in my brain. I was always overweight to some degree, which really kind of bothered me as a kid. Like, I think when I was 5, I was already 90 pounds, and by the time I entered freshman year in high school, I was 260. Now, I'm not here to fat shame. I don't think that weight is at all detrimental to someone's physical attractiveness. Quite the opposite, actually. The bigger the figure, the more I can love. But for me personally, it was something that I felt like I couldn't control, and it was unfortunately one of the first things that people brought up when they met me. Like, come on, you're a big guy, and oh, you got some weight on you, and hey, you play football? On the other side of people basically calling me fat to my face, if you grew up in an immigrant household, especially an Asian one, especially a Filipino one, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. Fat shaming is rampant. God, I know if my family is watching this, they definitely be like, ay, hindi ko sinabing mataba ka. And to that I would reply, paano ko natutunang ang salita taba, choy? I wonder what calling me fatty in Tagalog did for my childhood self-esteem. I think I speak for a lot of immigrant children when I say this, but as much as our families tried to do what was right for us, generational trauma still seeps through the cracks of good intentions. Many of us unfortunately grew up in a state where our gender, our weight, our everything was constantly surveilled and critiqued on. And that can lead to self-image issues that only complicate growing up in an intercultural context. Now, all of these factors put together made me put my feminine side, for lack of a better phrase, in the closet for a bit. I stopped caring about myself and my body in a more general sense. I would basically go weeks wearing the same clothes without washing them. I smelled like rotten sour ass all the time because I basically never showered. I grew this Orson Welles goatee that I thought would kind of hide my baby face. Turns out it just made me look like Orson Welles. A lot of people told me it made me look older, and I took that as an affirmation. It was basically, I should just keep this up even though I'm not sure how I feel about this new look I curated for myself. I had associated maturity with masculinity, and masculinity with just sort of settling for what people wanted out of me. My very toxic and gross understanding of what made a man was kind of something I hid behind to get away from my own insecurities. Once I started making movies with my friends in high school, I started to open back up to that experimental side that I had in middle school. My big tough guy persona was, in the end, a performance. And while I was still sort of stuck in that mindset, I started to change what the performance was. I no longer needed people to validate my manhood because I now had something else I would rather get credit for. All of a sudden, potential costumes, character ideas, scripts were all I could think about. All of the effort that I put into building up this persona for me to hide behind, I was now able to funnel back into my creative output. I started dressing however the fuck I wanted to school. I got heavy into like cosplay and military surplus collecting to, we'll say, varying degrees of success. Then a friend of mine showed me something that sort of instantly just clicked in my head. It was a picture of another cosplayer on Instagram, I think like a Jessica Rabbit or something. I don't remember, some like nerdy sex symbol. Heavy eyeliner, like bird wing sized false lashes. Also, you know, that other thing that cartoon women have accentuated on their body. So I'm looking at them like, wow, they're very pretty. And my friend's like, that's a dude. And I'm like, oh my god, how did he do that? Like it's a magic trick or something. And my friend says, I mean, you could probably pull it off too. And that moment for me was just like, it was like this sudden realization that this obsession that I've had with finding all these different ways of expressing myself could be extended beyond my gender. All of a sudden, this body that I felt like I had no control over other than what I chose to cover it with became something to take care of and respect. Before I knew it, I started exercising, trying to get into shape. I shaved my beard because it got to a very, very unfortunate state. I basically had a bikini wax landing strip, but on my chin. I drove straight into makeup, which, looking at my early cosplays, some of them were pretty rough. You know, I don't want to like shit on myself. It's more so for looking back at my growth. And all of you trans girlies out there, if you see old pictures of yourself, try not to cringe. Just sort of look at it as your story, who you became today. Cosplay then evolved into drag. Here are all of my drag looks. I think before fully coming out, a lot of trans women have that, oh no, I just like experimenting with makeup, I'm just a drag queen phase. I very quickly left that phase when it became apparent that I do not have what it takes to perform drag. Like, you gotta get into it, girl, and I can't dance. I have like 3 left feet. Hey, buddy. You wanna be in the video? Come up here. So once I realized that femininity wasn't a persona I wanted to assume, it was something at the very core of my being, I started going out presenting femininely a lot more often. School, hanging out with friends, going to parties. I worked on a lot of film sets where a lot of people were cool and I was able to like wear makeup and all. That was fun. I basically took advantage of anywhere where I wouldn't be unsafe to live more comfortably. But don't worry, I was always very unsafe, as is the unfortunate reality of being LGBTQ. Hey guys, if you want to comment on a stranger's body literally as your first words to them, especially in a sexual manner, remember the acronym NOPE. It stands for just don't fucking do it. If you're trans femme, then you definitely understand existing in the cross-section between not a real woman and still the victim of misogyny. The inverse is certainly true for trans men. Even though many men will say that I'm still male, they will still take my feminine appearance as a sign of weakness and gladly talk over me or disregard my experiences altogether. It's not everyone I meet. Most people are cool or at least self-restrained, but it's that 1% of motherfuckers. I also had to deal with people, mostly guys at college, act like weirdly, aggressively friendly towards me in a way that was clearly hiding ulterior motives. Like this one guy kept backhand complimenting my makeup in a way that showed he really didn't care. Yeah, I like red. Red looks pretty good on you, but green would also look really good on you too. No, you don't. What the heck are you talking about? Green lipstick? Are you just giving me colors you learned recently? He always wanted to bring up the fact that I was a dude in makeup, and he was like, yeah, I respect you, man. I respect you wearing lipstick and shit, dude. Another dude in my production design class kept trying to like debate me and like get me to like defend positions. Not my positions, mind you, just, you know, positions that might be out there somewhere. Oh, so you think it's okay for kids to just cut off their dicks and become women? Yes, that's exactly how it works. You demonstrate unparalleled knowledge in the subject at hand. In that it doesn't parallel anyone with knowledge. Okay, but like, what if a pervert dresses up as a woman and enters the bath? Listen here, Trevor, I'm not trying to make up excuses for a hypothetical person who doesn't exist. You can put the Ben Shapiro clip away.
Wet-ass P-word.
Alright. I feel like I need to bring this up. Let's just get it over with. Gender is not the same as sex. Yeah, no, I didn't have gender with your mom. Don't tell me to open up a biology book because I already did. The existence of intersex people alone is enough to dispel the myth that gender is what's in your pants. This is not really my area of study. There are hundreds of academic resources on the topic of biological sex in nature and how it differs from gender, which is a societal definition. But if all of you, oh, read a biology book, people actually took your own advice, we wouldn't be here. So I will come at this from my actual area of study, the humanities and filmmaking. In anthropology class, it became apparent time and time again that many cultures, especially indigenous ones, have historically had a place for gender fluidity and gender non-conforming people in their society. Circling back to my ethnicity for a second, the Bakla are a class in Filipino society made up of people assigned male at birth, but who express themselves more femininely. While the term is sometimes used to refer to gay men or trans women specifically, this usage is generally seen as pejorative and is heavily discouraged. The Bakla still represent a form of gender transition, but separate from the binary understanding of male and female. I usually bring this up when people act like transitioning is this new thing that modern institutions have only really been doing for the last 10 years. If you really look at the history of the human race, trans and gender non-conforming people have always existed. The Hijra or Aravani people of South Asia are a great example of a male-to-female third gender role in a society. They're believed to be descended from the Hindu legend of Krishna and Aravan. In the Mahabharata, Krishna takes the form of his female avatar Moini and marries the hero Aravan before his execution so that he may experience the joys of marriage before death. This story is reenacted in a yearly ceremony by Hijras in Koovagam, a Tamil-speaking town in southern India. On that note, many religious and mythological traditions have included gender-changing or gender fluidity in a lot of their stories. Oh, hold up, I actually have this one up here. In the Odyssey, when Athena goes to Odysseus' son Telemachus to tell him that his father is still alive, she does so by taking the form of an old man to speak to Telemachus through a position of authority. There's also other Greek myths like Hermaphroditus, Caeneus, Leucippus, and Tiresias, who turned into a woman after striking a pair of mating snakes, had multiple children as a woman, turned back into a man after not hitting another pair of snakes, then declared before Hera and Zeus that sex feels objectively better as a woman. I knew I picked the right team. In more recent history, we have figures like Marsha P. Johnson and Silvia Rivera, arguably the most prominent activists in the early American LGBTQ movement. While they didn't necessarily use the term transgender to describe themselves, they famously stood up for trans people in a gay rights movement that had basically abandoned them.
I have been beaten. I have had my nose broken. I have been thrown in jail. I have lost my job. I have lost my apartment for gay liberation. And you all treat me this way?
I'll just list more historic trans people here because I find it interesting. There's Lily Elba, a Danish painter and one of the first people to undergo sex reassignment surgery. The LGBTQ Film Festival in Copenhagen gives out an award named after her each year, the Lily Award. Albert DJ Cashier was a trans man who served in the Union Army during the American Civil War. Though he is only one of about 250 women who assumed a male identity to fight in that war, he ended up spending the rest of his life as a man. Dude, if you're a trans masked musician, your stage name needs to be DJ Cashier. Oh, you want to get back up here? Come on. There's also Chevalier d'Eon, who was a spy during the 7 Years' War and officially recognized by King Louis XVI as a woman. Too bad she was a fucking monarchist. Public Universal Friend, yes, that's their name, was an American Quaker priest in the late 18th century who claimed to have died and returned as a genderless being to preach the word of God. It's not he, him, she, her, or they, them. You're meant to refer to them in the abstract as the friend. How's that for neopronouns? Hello, nice to meet you. My pronouns are the friend's self. In film and entertainment history, Christine Jorgensen was one of the first publicly out trans women in Hollywood. Her life story was supposed to be depicted in the film I Changed My Sex, but was instead turned into Glen or Glenda, directed by Edward D. Wood Jr. Ed Wood himself was a gender non-conforming person, with a public Angora sweater fetish, and famously employed drag queens and queer people in his films, namely gay performer Bunny Breckenridge, who played a sassy alien in Wood's most famous film, Plan 9 from Outer Space. These are by no means good movies. In fact, they're quite famously the opposite.
Inspector Clay's dead. Murdered. And somebody's responsible.
However, they're really rare windows into 50s queer culture and enjoyably bad watches nonetheless. I highly recommend the film Ed Wood for a dramatized retelling of his career. One of Tim Burton's lesser known flicks, but Johnny Depp absolutely kills it as Edward. It's one of my favorite movies, though the criteria for that seems to just be have a character named Ed. Bonus points if they're trans, apparently. Now, I bring this all up because I want to iterate how important it is for us as trans people to keep sharing our stories. As someone who studied film and communication in college, we are at no better point in history to do that than right now. The internet brings people together, the whole world is at your fingertips, yada yada yada. But also I believe that trans people are uniquely good storytellers because self-reflection and narrativizing your own experiences are kind of part of the deal. It's really hard to discover the truth of who you are at your being without those things. You had my perspective on the matter, but mine is not at all a universal experience. Talk to a trans man about his life and you will get a completely different perspective. That's not even mentioning intersex, non-binary, and gender fluid people who have very interesting and valid experiences to share with the world. I asked my friend and fellow YouTuber Shakestar about her story transitioning, and this is what she shared with me.
Hi, it's me, Shakestar, the one and only. Well, let's talk about it, a little bit about me and my gender expression. I'm non-binary feminine, and that means I am non-binary. I use they, them pronouns, but I lean more to the feminine side, so I'm not against people calling me she, her, or anything else like that. When it comes down to the idea of the story that I have for myself, I had always questioned the idea of why are things made for boys? Why are things made for girls when there are so many things in TV shows, movies, and other things that I just experienced in my life that really meld both of those experiences. And the older I got, I started to experiment with both of those things on myself, and just the way how I would present to other people and the way how I would draw myself and generally just like my art. I remember watching anime. I would look at the different character designs and be like, I wish I had a physique like that. Sometimes it'll be like a masculine character. I'm like, oh, I really want a physique like that. But then it'll be a feminine character and I'm like, oh, I want a physique like that. Anime, cosplaying, my art, these have all been things that have helped make me get to the point within the transition that I'm in right now. Like my little Shakestar character icon, some people have pointed out, oh, some of them have breasts and the other ones don't. Do you want to explain to me about that? And it's like, each character looks different. Why not give them a different kind of stance on the way how they present gender-wise? And that has been definitely something that has helped me not just be a YouTuber, but also just express myself more artistically. Before I go, if you guys are considering doing the process, make sure you have some really good people with you in your life. And if you don't, just know that you deserve to be happy with yourself. And at the end of the day, you have to live with you. No one else can do that. And it's up to you to take the steps to make yourself feel better and do better by you. That's all I gotta say. And I'm gonna go back to editing my giant Gorg review. Goodbye.
All that being said, I still cannot stress enough how important it is to tell our stories. Like I mentioned in my funeral parade of roses video, there are unfortunately a lot of anti-trans voices who are poisoning public discourse on the subject and kind of taking away the validity of our words and frankly our lives. We really need to take the narrative back because no one should be allowed to tell our stories but us. Trans Remembrance Day was just this Wednesday. If you don't know what that is, it's essentially the anniversary of the murder of this woman named Chanel Pickett. It's very important that we say her name so that we don't forget, because Trans Remembrance Day is a memorial day where we not only recognize all of the people who died because of this, who were murdered because of this, but it is sort of a sobering reminder of just how dangerous life has really become for a lot of us. It's so important to remember them, along with everyone who's out, everyone who is questioning it, and people who can't come out of the closet, or who will never get the opportunity to. In the interest of preserving one more story, I want to read you something that was brought to my attention on Trans Remembrance Day. Kalonymus ben Kalonymus was a Jewish philosopher who lived in early Renaissance France. In 1322, he wrote this prayer for transformation that was part of a larger poem of his called Evan Bohan. Now, I wish I could read this in the original Hebrew, given the absolute depth that that writing system has and all of the symbolism behind each glyph. I am working with an English translation here, so a lot of the meaning and a lot of the poetics in general will be lost. I'm also not a scholar, nor do I profess to know the interpretation of this text, because in my research I found out there are a lot of ways to interpret what he is saying here. But I really just wanted to share this with all of you because despite it being penned hundreds of years ago, I and so many other queer people find these words very relatable. For me personally, it feels like stuff I've said to myself when I was still going through that very bad phase. What shall I say? Why cry or be bitter? If my Father in heaven has decreed upon me and has maimed me with an immutable deformity, then I do not wish to remove it. The sorrow of the impossible is a human pain that nothing will cure, and for which no comfort can be found. So I will bear and suffer until I die and wither in the ground. Since I have learned from our tradition that we bless both the good and the bitter, I will bless in a voice hushed and weak. Blessed are you, God, who has not made me a woman. Hi, thank you for watching. This was a much more personal video and about as personal as I'm going to get. We are living in very dangerous times for the LGBTQ community. And, you know, when I get older and I look back at this very troublesome period in our history, I want to be able to say that I used my skills, my videos, my platform to call attention to it and hopefully make it better. So yeah, if this didn't somehow surprise you and scare you away from my channel, please hit subscribe, give me a like. I very much appreciate it. And be sure to catch me next time because I am not going anywhere. Take care.